Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the 3-Star Lounge. Today we begin the tale of Jessie Faden, an extraordinary woman from ordinary Maine, as she explores the oldest house in search for her brother, but instead receives so much more. Join us as we peel back the curtain of the astral plane with control. It was just afternoon when Jessie arrived at the most intimidating building she had ever seen, but yet had never seen on any visit to the streets of New York City. A blank facade of gray bricks with no windows aside from the doors of the reception area. Why am I here? She thought as she began to ascend the steps of the uninviting structure. As she continued to climb, her mind continued to produce questions. Could the people here know about Dylan? Do they know about me? Will they help? Can they help? She continued in, but instead of being greeted by the noise and activity a building of such scale was sure to have, she was met with the silence of absence as she stood alone in the reception area of a building she was beginning to regret entering. "Hello," she shouted as she approached the desk on the far side of the room. On the wall behind it reads a sign, Federal Bureau of Control. The desk was covered in files and other documents as if the person who was reading them had run off in a hurry. Jessie took a glance at what was left behind, and that's when she saw it. Displayed on the front of the folder was an emblem. A guard tower being protected by an eagle, wings spread, wielding a sword in one talon and a key in the other. An inverted pyramid shines above it all. Jessie's eyes widened. It's them. She thought, it's the ones who took my brother 17 years ago. I've been searching all these years and they were right next door all along. This is why I'm here. Jessie continues on through the empty hallways, passing several empty office spaces and being extra careful to trip the metal detectors along the way, until she hears a man singing in a language she didn't quite understand, maybe Finnish, but in the sound of a broom hard at work. Turning the corner, Jessie was glad to receive visuals that matched the sound. The old gray-haired singing janitor donned headphones as he tended to his work. "Excuse me," Jessie spoke to the man, intending to get a few answers, but before she could even speak, without removing his headphones, he turns and says, "You must be here for the job. Janitor's assistant. You have to go to the interview. Take the elevator to the executive sector and tell him I sent you." Jessie was going to let him know that she didn't know his name, but as soon as she inhaled to speak, "I'm Ati, the janitor, by the way. You'll be working for me. If they don't hire you, there should be work for the axe." Ati grumbled a few words in Finnish that Jessie assumed were swears of some sort before returning to his broom and song. Jessie simply thanked the man and headed toward the elevators. Jessie, like Ati, worked a few graveyard shifts herself and was aware that the solitude can make someone seem off in social situations. Some may find it rude, but Jessie saw a friend in Ati. Things were looking up. She finally found someone to talk to and got directed straight to the man at the top. She hits the button next to the word executive, and as the elevator glides to its destination, all Jessie could do was think about how close she was to seeing her brother again after 17 years. 17 years of searching for answers. And now, she was finally gonna get some. The elevator doors slide open to yet another room devoid of life. Devoid of life, but not sound. The security alarm is ringing with no one to react to his cries. The nerves from the elevator ride are beginning to be replaced with fear. But Jessie had come much too close to turn back, so she continued on. Passing empty office after empty office until she reached the receptionist's desk, also abandoned, but with only one paper on its surface this time. It was a note for the former occupant of this desk, a woman named Barbara. According to this note that reads, the sender was not to be disturbed for the rest of the week. It went on talking about how they were unable to trust any of them before signing off. Someone named Trench. Bang! Jessie hears a gunshot from behind the doors of a nearby office space. The placard on the wall near the door reads, Director Zachariah Trench. Jessie's heart sank. Did the only man with the answers I sought just die? She slowly opened the twin doors to peek through, not seeing anyone through the space between them before opening fully and entering in. She walked cautiously, approaching the director's chair thinking, maybe I was just hearing things. and held on to that thought as long as she could. She held out hope that her answers were still available until she saw a middle-aged man in a pressed black suit with a shirt to match, pistol lying at his side. It looked like he'd done it himself. Jessie tried to collect her thoughts, but something was calling to her. She felt the need to approach. She felt compelled to take up the pistol. She tries to resist the urge, but her body moves without command. She hears promises of pulling back the curtain between this world and the truth as she grabbed the pistol's grip. As her hand wraps around the strange weapon, she enters a trance, seeing memories that did not belong to her. It was the man lying at her feet watching a video of some scientists rambling on about altered world events. He called them AWEs before moving on to talk about so-called objects of power, while holding a black cube to the camera.
The service weapon is an especially powerful and inviolable to the operation of the Bureau's prime candidate program, terminating those who are unfit to wield it, but for those who can.
Her vision goes white, and the curtain, as it were, began to lift. All she could see was a white void in the black inverted pyramid that seemed to lord over the space as if waiting to judge something, or someone. She heard a voice, or at least she thought it a voice, but seemed mostly noise.
We are broadcasting from the pyramid. The director can work this test. Begin now.
Looking down, Jessie saw a platform beneath her with more lifting from the void to create a bridge matching the pyramid in hue. Jessie followed the bridge until its end, when even more blocks arose from the bright abyss, raising even higher than before, creating a small mesa-like structure in the void. Jessie climbed until she saw the gun again on a pedestal, just waiting for her. She starts to approach the pedestal when up from the platform rose not a pillar, but a humanoid figure that struck at Jessie. She reached out to strike back, and the creature was blown away before disappearing from the void altogether. Jessie looked at her hands, wondering if this was the representation of reality or merely another trick of the void.
Was any of this real?
But there was no more time for thinking. She kept moving, finally grasping her query. The weapon shook violently as if attempting to jettison itself from the grip of its handler. The barrel broke apart and reformed over and over, revealing the blocks that made its form. Jessie grabbed on with both hands, attempting to corral the weapon, and it was nearly gone before it settled, completing her test. Or at least she thought so, until she realized not only was she not exiting the void, but was still very much in the void, just better equipped. Jessie heard the board once more, but voices clear.
Eliminate the targets.
Jessie turned to see two more humanoid creatures. These moved slowly, shuffling to and fro like dummies at a firing range, moving behind the pillars that now line the area. Raising her firearm, bits lifted to create sights for her. She took her aim and fired a few shots at each one. They too vanished from the void like the previous one. What Jessie didn't see, though, was the third preparing to fire its own weapon, shuffling from behind one of those pillars. There was only a moment to react. Bang! It was a crack shot. Jessie downed her targets.
You wield the gun.
The board spoke again.
We now appoint you director. Congratulations.
The sound of the board faded away and the void fell from view, replaced only by darkness and a blue light.
There's an attack coming.
A voice Jessie had never heard before seemed to come through the light.
A threat.
She started to see a face in the light.
The director must keep the Bureau safe.
Jessie saw the face of the dead man in the light. It's him, the former director.
Something is coming.
That was the last of it. Jessie was once again in the office, sound of the alarm filling the air, weapon to head, making it clear what the cost of failure is for those who grab the weapon. Is this what happened to him? But why? Eyeing Trench once again, Jessie looked around to see if there was anything that could be of use going forward, only finding stacks of papers with redacted information. She read one paper saying that the service weapon is bound to individuals with more redacted information following, but it ended with a hypothesis. The author hypothesized that the service weapon is a form of a legendary weapon, the lights of Baronastra, Mjolnir, and Excalibur. The paper was written by Dr. Darling, taken from one of his presentations. Jessie had a new name and a new lead to follow. She didn't understand everything that just happened, but she was going to. Jessie headed toward the office doors, the sound of alarm strangely fading away with each step. As it faded, the sound was being replaced by a sound more alien than any she'd ever heard. It began to bore its way into her mind, pushing out the sounds of her surroundings, and eventually the sounds of her own thoughts. Whatever it was an invader, and it wanted to control her. Her vision began to go red. She could see 3 men down the hall floating with glowing red eyes. Security guards. They lost, and she was losing too. There was something in her, though. Something that was fighting back. A guiding force she and her brother shared. Polaris, they called it. It pushed out the corruption and the sound of alarm returned. You stopped it. She was free from whatever it was, but Jessie, she was not without scars. She would never forget what that was for as long as she lived. The hissing. She looked down the hall to see the security guards appeared to have been freed as well. Then they raised their weapons. Jessie ducked behind the corner of a corridor for cover and started to sink in.
This is real.
The men fired wildly, but their positioning made the whole thing seem planned. Gunshots and heavy breathing were the only sounds now. After a few moments, the fire stopped and the 3 men slipped deeper into the building, clearly not knowing or simply not caring that Jessie survived their attack. She looked at the signs above where the men were headed, and it read Central Executive with arrows pointing the way. She took a moment to see if the coast was clear before heading on after the shambling husk we once called human life. As she walked, she noticed more and more people were occupying the office spaces, well, in the technical sense. All of the employees the eye could see were being suspended in midair like the security guards as well as Jessie herself, but they did not yet have the glowing red eyes.
Could this still be reversed?
It was pointless. Right now, this line of thinking was absolutely useless. She just didn't know enough about what was going on to think about reversing anything. The only thing she could think to do was find anyone who isn't being affected and go from there. Following the signs, Jessie found that her surroundings grew stranger the closer she got to the central executive wing. Parts of the walls and floors jutted out in all kinds of strange ways, as if the building was attempting to reform itself in new and creative ways. Then came the red glow she saw before. Then came the hissing. This time, though, it was all external. No invasion this time around. Polaris, it seemed, kept it at bay. The room looked more like an arena than any executive's office Jessie had ever seen, but the inverted pyramid at the center gave her the feeling that she was in the right place. She could see the security guards inside, but this time there was more of them, 5 in number. They hadn't yet noticed her presence either. Jessie ducked behind a short wall for cover, took a deep breath, and got to work. 3 shots rang out, no hits, sloppy work.
Settle down, Jessie. You panic, you die.
3 more shots, one of the men vanished just like they had in a void. 3 more shots, another target dusted. Then the grenades came. Jessie leapt over the short wall she used for covering down into the executive arena. Pillars rose and fell periodically, revealing both Jessie as well as her 2 remaining targets. She moved quickly, avoiding fire and returning to in return. She found cover by a newly formed pillar not ready to fall. Took a peek around its corner to see one of the guards, and she let loose 3 more shots. Another one down. She looked around for somewhere to go, but the pillars are falling again. She got a glimpse of the last guard. His back was turned. She ran for him. Winding up like she had before in the void, Jessie reached out toward the man. He turned the fire. A dull thump, and the guard was blown back but not yet killed. Jessie raised her weapon and fired. She fired once, not because that's all she thought she needed, no, but that's all she seemingly had. She looked down at her weapon and the blocks were spinning around the barrel as if it was recharging, and after a while it stopped, rejoining with it. Jessie shot at the wall a few times to see what would happen, and there it was again, little blocks spinning around the weapon before rejoining with it. It wasn't any time to ponder this, though, as Jessie was hearing Trench again.
Cleanse the control point. Get to the hotline.
Jessie didn't really know what he meant, but the big X on the floor seemed like a good place to start. This part of the room had all kinds of equipment surrounding it and seemed to point at the inverted pyramid. Jessie put her hand on the ground and felt the power this area seemed to hold. She could feel the corruption. She could feel Polaris pushing it out. For long, the room was shifting again, but this time to what Jessie had assumed was its normal state. No red lights and architecture from this dimension was good enough for her.
We did it. You did it.
Hello? Are you still there?
Jesse heard a voice coming from a nearby intercom.
Are you with the Bureau?
Jesse followed the sound to a giant metal door featuring the word shelter and an intercom on its face.
Are you still sane?
Jesse finally replies, "Yes, I'm still here, and nice to finally talk to somebody sane."
Sane.
The voice replies.
I saw you deal with our compromised agents. I'm Emily Pope, Dr. Darling's assistant.
Jesse's interest was further piqued at hearing the name from the papers. She wondered if she should conceal her identity, but told Miss Pope the truth anyway.
You're the new director?
The voice replied, seemingly shocked before the giant door began to slide open. Another armed guard emerged, followed by a few other random employees, all wearing some strange speaker-looking device on their chest. At last, to exit, was a blonde woman with a big smile. "Director Faden?" "Just call me Jesse. You must be Miss Pope." "Okay, Jesse. So to catch you up on this hostile force, this, hiss," Jesse interrupted. "I like that," Emily continues. "The hiss started leaking in and infecting anyone not wearing an HRA, pointing at the device on her chest, and surprisingly, you." Jessie took her chance to get an answer or two. She told Emily about her journey up to that point, but took great care to avoid the intervention of Polaris and focus more on the message from Trench. Emily took a moment to think, then spoke up. "He said to cleanse the control point, and you were able to do that? Could you maybe save those who were infected?" Looking over to her co-workers or agents floating in the air. Jesse, who had been running the same thing, figured there was no harm in trying and walked over to one of the floating workers. Grabbing their head, Jesse tried to push the hiss out, and after a moment, the woman fell, but she did not stand. She vanished, either taken by the hiss or the abyss. And that is all we have for today here on the 3-Star Lounge. This was just a little taste of what we do over there. If you would like more of Control, you can head over to the podcast. We will be continuing it there. And I will be uploading it up here too, but I will be putting on the podcast first. So if you want to get it a little early, you can check out the podcast. But in the meantime, if you want to just check it out right here, hit the thumbs up button, let the algorithm know that you like that shit. And I will be continuing on. But I also have something for you guys here at this space as well. I got a little something for you. We'll be doing Horizon Zero Dawn, both the original game and as well as the sequel, whenever I finish that. But that will be done here on the 3-Star Lounge YT. There's just a little taste to let you know what we do, how we do things. Head over to the podcast. There's more. We got Greedfall, we got Control, and we will have Horizon Zero Dawn over there eventually. But that one's for y'all. We're gonna do that one here first. So once again, sub upward. Let them know that you like that shit. Have a good day.